Okay, so hello, welcome back to another Blazor tutorial. In this video, we're going to be using the profiles that we created in the last video through our authorization to be used as authors for books, so that now when you create a book or edit a book, you can alter the author. Eventually, we'll probably make it so you can only set the author to be yourself, but for now, you can just set it to be anyone that has an account on the website. So when you create a book or add a book, you set who the author is. For now, it'll just be yourself, unless you have multiple accounts in the database. And then in the next few videos, we can make author pages, and on an author page, you can view all the books by that author. So we're going to be getting into that over the next few videos. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. So I've split this video up into 5 parts. Let's go over it briefly. In part 1, we'll be updating packages. That won't take very long, just so we're all in the same versions. Step 2, we'll be altering our database models, adding some new properties like display name to profiles and adding authors to books. Then we'll be running the migrations for that. Then for step 3, I'll be going over places where we currently use component base as a class, and we're going to be using owning component base instead. I'll explain more when we get to it, but it's just a performance thing. We don't actually have to do it, but you'll understand when we get to it. For step 4, we'll be making a wrapper class around the built-in input select to allow us to actually output a number or bind to a number rather than binding to a string, which will help us a lot when saving IDs to a database model. Then finally, for step 5, we'll be updating our pages so that we actually are able to select, using our new select number, the profiles. So we'll have a drop down of all the profiles that exist, and we'll be able to select who we want to set the author as. Let's get into it. So to update the packages, head over to your solution, open manage NuGet packages for solution. If you go to updates, you'll notice there should be some updates. I'm going to turn off include pre-release, so we're just using stable versions, and I'm going to update these 2 components. Maybe you've got more than this, but just make sure they're all updated. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Everything should still work, but I just want to make sure we're all on the new versions. Okay, that's that. For step 2, we'll go over to the profile model, and we're going to add a public string display name, like so. Now, because we already have a profile for ourselves in the database, what will actually happen is this might be null when we create it. So we can actually set a default value, or we can make it so that when they create their account, they have to also give a display name, but we're not going to worry about the actual account creation right now. Just for now, we're going to manually hard code our display name, or just give a default one actually. Let's just say the display name is new user. Okay, but because we already have a profile, that won't actually work. This is only when a new profile is created. So presumably right now you have one profile in your database, which is your own profile that you made. So that will be the only one that you have to set manually. Everything else should be set automatically, and we'll handle that later when we actually test the pages. Then if we head over to the book, we want to add an author. Now, we're not going to bother making an author class right now. We're just going to link it straight to a profile, but eventually we might want something in between. We might want an author class that has a profile, but for now, we're just going to keep it as a profile in here. So we want a public profile, like so. We'll call it author. So this is the author of the book, and it's a get set property. And then above this, we also want an integer, which is going to be the ID. So it'll be the author ID. And then we want to say this author ID is the foreign key for this author. So we'll use the foreign key tag, like so. And then the foreign key name is just the same name as this string here, or as this variable here. So that's it. Now that books have an author ID, we can actually include the author when getting the book. And what it'll do is it'll go to the author or the profile table, and it'll use this ID to go get us the author so that we can actually grab all that data in one query. Okay, let's move on to the next step. So with our profiles, we're actually going to want to be able to load them up. So we're going to create a task list of profile. I've made a new profile service, by the way, just like the book service, I've made a profile service. So it's going to return us a list of profiles. Let's make sure we include the namespace. And then we want to make a function to get all profiles async. That's what it's going to do. And then we're going to implement it down here. So let's implement the interface. Okay. And what's this actually going to do? It's just going to return from the database the profiles as a list. Okay. Just like this, to list async. Now, even though this is a task, usually I would write async here and await this. But actually, one thing I've learned quite recently is we don't actually have to await things. If only one thing is going to be awaited, we don't have to do it. Unless we have to, okay, now we'll get into an example. We'll actually go across now to the book service, and we're going to just change this quickly. So we go down to here. Now, one thing is we don't need to use add async. If we actually read add async, I've only read this recently, it's only async to allow special cases. Now, we don't have any of the special cases, so we're just going to change it to add and get rid of the await, get rid of the async, get rid of the configure await. So we just say context.books.add, And over here, we don't want to await it, we're just going to return it, because this actually is a task. If something's asynchronous, it returns a task. So if we return that, then it's happy, we can actually do this, and it's actually faster, and it's just more efficient than doing it the other way. So we're going to go down here and do effectively the same thing. Okay, we just remove, and then we return this instead of awaiting it, and then we get rid of the configure await. Then down here, it's basically the same thing. We don't need a sync, we just want to return this, and then we get rid of that. Okay, we could equally just go put this on one line because it's short enough. Okay, and then to get books by ID, it's the same thing. We just return it, we don't await, like this. And then to update, just like the other ones, we do it, and then we return this, and then we get rid of the configure await, and make sure it's not async anymore. And now it's all happy. So this is going to actually work the same way, it's just going to be more efficient, okay? And we'll do that from now on. And that's the profile service done. If we head over to the startup, we can add it to dependency injection. So services.add scoped, profile service, profile service. Now let's go run the migrations. So I've got the migration command here. You can pause if you need to get it. We're going to add a migration, call added authors, leave the other stuff like it normally is for the library context and the migrations folder. We're going to run it. Once we run it, it should only take a second. It should build, and once it's built, it'll go through and create the class for us, or create the migration file. We'll actually be able to see it in a second, like always. If we go to migrations, you see over here we've got added authors. We're going to add a column, a column of type string called display name to profiles. You know, it's very easy to read and understand what this does. We're adding an author ID, and then here we are doing a foreign key. I'm not going to go read through all this, even though I already have basically. And then now we want to update the database to be the added authors migration. So let's go do that. So this is running the migration that you see behind us. It's going to run that on our actual database. We'll give it a second, and once it's done, then the database will actually be updated to have all these things. I don't think, something went wrong. Okay, let's go debug it. Okay, so the thing I forgot was simply one key, one character. If we go over to our book, this author ID actually needs to be nullable, because some books will not have authors. What if you don't know the author for the book? It'll be null. And also, the problem right now is we already have books in the database that don't have authors, so when we try and do this migration, they have no author, but the database model is telling them that they have to, because this isn't nullable. So we have to add a question mark here to make this a nullable int, okay? Now, as far as I'm aware, we can actually do a kind of cheat here. Instead of regenerating and going back and forward with the migrations, if we head over to this migrations class, we can manually edit it. So if we go over here for the author ID of books, it's nullable false. We'll set it to be nullable true, okay? And then the default value, I don't think needs to be set because it's null, so it should do this. Okay, if we just run this now, if I run the database update and give it a second, fingers crossed this will work, and if not, I'll have to actually go redo the migration, but in that case you probably won't see me saying this because it'll be cut out. So let's see if it works. Done. There we go. Okay, nice. I'm going to assume that worked, and then we'll move on to next step. So owning component base, what it actually does is, let's say we use it here, owning component base. It basically disposes anything, any services when you leave this component or page. So this is a page, but obviously we can use it for components too. What normally happens is when you actually leave a page and you've had services injected, they hang around, which does mean that yes, you can actually keep them there in case you go back. They stay there, so you don't have to load them again and inject them. But on the other side, if you don't go back to that page, then they just sit there and use up memory that needs to be collected later. So it just means that your app actually has a lower memory usage most of the time, because as soon as you're done with something, you get rid of it. Now, you might not actually want this, but it is apparently best practice and recommended by people, talking about Blazor on the internet. So the way you do it is you change from component base to owning component base. And then in the other file, we have to actually make sure we say that it inherits owning component base. Now, there is a handy thing you can do. If you only have one type of service, like we have the iBook service, then you can just type it in here. But because I know we're going to have in this case, we're not going to have different types. In this case, we'll only have the book service. So if we say iBook service here, what we can do is we can just get rid of this. We go back here, we have to make sure it's of iBook service, okay? And then personally, I'd like to put this as a using. Okay. Make sure that's back here, and then get rid of that dot. So now once all these syntax things are fixed. We now have this owning component base of iBook service, and then if we go back over here, instead of book service, it's just service, and service will be whatever type that you put here. Okay. Now this works if you've only got one type, but you can't just add another type here. You actually have to do it slightly differently if you have multiple, which we will have an example of that in a minute. Okay, so if we go through, that's the book edit page. The book page also has the book service, so we just say owning component base of type iBook service. Okay, we get rid of this inject. We then copy this, go F7, and we inherit like so, this. And then we're just using Blazor tutorial dot core.services.books. Okay. Then down here we just say service again. Now, as I said, this isn't a necessary step. You guys could skip this if you want to, but I'm doing it because it's how we actually do it in our own project for our own website and platform. I think it's better to do it this way anyway. There's one more place where we do it. I'm actually just going to go through and do it. You know, I'm going to cut ahead. You guys don't need to see me do this. And then I'll go to another example where we actually have 2 services in a minute. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done all those changes. If you guys want to see all the places where I did it, then you can go down below and look on GitHub, but I'm not going to waste time going through each one. If we actually go to books now, you'll see everything still works. We can go view a book. We can do everything we used to be able to do. Now we want to add an author thing here, so we can view the author, whether it's their name or like unknown if they don't have one, if it's null. And then we also want to be able to, when we go to, for example, book/edit/4, we want to be able to actually add the author here and select from a drop down. So let's move on to that now. So if we go over to Core Web, I'm going to actually create a new folder. We're going to add the folder. It's going to be called inputs, and this is just going to be oh wait, name conflicts. Okay, so if I actually go manually to this folder, then inputs is still left over from earlier. It's just an annoying Visual Studio thing when you're using Git, but if we go make a folder again and we call it inputs, then it's fine. And in inputs, we're going to make a new class, and we'll call it the input select number. Okay. Now, I'm actually just going to copy paste this because at the end of the day, it's not the most complex thing, but what it does is it's just a wrapper around the built-in input select, but it's our own type. Okay. And we basically need to say, when we try and pass the value from a string, if the type of this thing is an integer, then try and pass it as an integer. If we can pass it as an integer, then there's no error and it returns true because it's fine. Otherwise, then it's not valid, because if we fail to pass it or it's not of an integer, then there's problems, right? So that's what it's doing, and it actually outputs to us an integer, which is what we want. So we can actually save this as an ID in our model. Now this is for a number, but the thing is, this int is actually different to a nullable int, which is this. So we want to actually make another version of this for nullable numbers. So I'm going to go copy paste it, and I'm going to call it the input select nullable number. Nullable. Okay. And then I'm going to go just copy the nullable version. Now, as I said, if you guys want access to this, which you probably do, I guess, just look down below. But the only difference really is that the type is of nullable in and try parse it and so on. Okay. And now what we can actually do is we can go use this component, because it's just a component we can use in a page, like an input select. We can go use it to select from a drop down of profiles and save the profile nullable ID to the model. Because if you remember correctly, if we go over to our DAL models in our book, this is a nullable int, so we actually want an easy way to bind to this, so that's why I've made these extension classes. Now those might end up existing but built in, and I might not even notice, but at the moment I'm pretty confident they don't exist built in. So yep, that's that. Let's move on to the next step. So to be able to display the authors in the page, we actually want to include them in our queries from the books. So when we load up a book, currently we just get the book data. If you look at a book, we have this. We get everything apart from the author. We get the author ID though, and with the author ID, we can then get the author. Now this is all kind of built in for us with the query. So if we say over here, when we get the books, we want to say include the book's author. Okay, and that then lets us access the author. Now, in certain cases, when you query a book, you don't care about the author, in which case you don't bother getting it. But in the cases where we get the book by ID, when we use it in a page and stuff, we definitely want the author to display its name and set it. And then the same thing when we get all books to display in a table, we want to display the author's name. So we want to include the author here, and then here as well, when we get all books, we want to include the author. Okay. Now we can go over to places where we normally, for example, if we go to core web, books, we have the book table component, okay? So for the book table component, we're going to add an extra header here. We're going to add a header for author, and then we'll add an extra element over here, okay? And it's going to be book.author, whoops, book.author. Now that author can be null, remember. So we'll do a question mark, the null check, display name. The thing is, if this is null, we actually want to display a default value rather than just blank. Because right now, if the author doesn't exist, it'll just display blank. So we'll say, if that's null, just say unknown. Okay. Now for this to actually work, we have to put it inside brackets. Okay. So we're saying, if the author is not null, do its display name. Otherwise, just say unknown. So if there's no author, then we just say unknown. Okay. And that works. Now we can actually be doing the same kind of stuff in other places. So I'm actually going to copy this. Okay, copy this. And then if we jump over to the view component, we want to say here maybe as a h2 or something. At book.author display name unknown. Okay, so right now when we load the book in the view page, we're going to do the same thing. We say load their display name, otherwise just say unknown for the author. Okay, so that's in the table and in the view. Now in the create and edit is where we want to be able to actually select these things, right? We want to be able to select from a list of authors or a list of profiles, select the author. Okay, let's go do that. So in the book create component, we're going to add an input select nullable number. And because I don't like having these super long things, we're going to cut that out and we're going to add it to our usings. So at using this. So now we've got our nullable number. Let's just format that. So on the nullable number, we want to bind the value to the book's author ID. Okay, so whatever number comes out of this number select, it's going to be bound to this ID, which means it sets it in the model for us. Then the default option that always exists, well, the value is blank, it means null effectively, and then it's just going to say like select and author. Okay, so this is what it says on the input select when nothing is selected, and if you actually select this, it'll set the author to be null. Then we want to do a loop for every profile that exists, so we're going to say for each var profile in profiles, which we haven't got yet, but we'll do that in a second. We want to add a new option for each one, where the option's value is going to be the profile ID, so profile.id, okay, like this. And then the actual text for it is going to be the display name, so we'll say profile.displayname. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to actually load all the profiles. So if we go over to the page here, now remember this is one of the places where we use this owning component base. Problem is we use the book service and now we actually need the profile service because we want to store here like a private enumerable of profile. We want to store all the profiles to enumerate over them. I'm actually going to move that up here. So yeah, the problem comes now when we need two services. So we actually have to take out the type, okay? We have to take out the type and do it up here as well. So we don't actually need the book service thing here anymore. Just the owning component base, which should work. It is working, it just hasn't gone green yet. There we go. Oops, I just said build. Now, instead of service, we actually have to get them manually. So the way we do this is we say, I want a private iBook service, called it book service, and I want a private iProfile service, call it profile service. Then when we load this page, so override on initialize async, when it loads, what do we want to do? The first thing we want to do is we want to say, well, book service is equal to an iBook service. Now there's this thing called scope services where we can actually get a service. This is from dependency injection. We just have to tell it what type, the type of an iBook service. And that's the standard way you do this. So we also want the profile service. So we say profile service, iProfile service like this. So this is the new way we're actually injecting things. And then finally, this needs to be asynchronous, like so. We want to await getting all the profiles. So we're going to say profiles is equal to await profile service dot get all profiles async. So now we've actually loaded all the profiles. And then this is the book service over here. This is happy now. We head over here. The only problem is this will throw an error because when it actually first tries to do it, the profiles will be null. So we have to make sure that when we render this, profiles isn't null. So profiles does not equal null. Then render it. Okay, get rid of that stupid thing that pops up. So now when the profiles have been loaded, we give them an input select for all the profiles and it's bound to the author ID. And we want to do effectively the same thing over in the book edit component. So if we copy paste this profiles, we go to the book edit component, we get rid of the iBook service thing, get rid of this. And then over here, we'll add this in too. This is a capital B for the book. And then we need to make sure we're using Blazor tutorial.core web inputs, so we can use the input nullable select. We go over to the edit component, like page effectively. We're gonna take these because we need the same things. Get rid of this type here. Import profiles. This is the book service that we need here, and same here. And then we need to override the, actually let's just copy paste it in. At some point we might abstract this out somehow and reuse the code, but for the sake of this, I'm happy doing this. We just need a way to actually save profiles now. So here, private I enumerable type profile. Profiles. And now I think everyone's happy if I import collections generic. So what we expect now is when we go to create and edit, we can actually do profiles. Okay, let's go give it a go. So we go to our app, we go to books, and you'll notice author is unknown because we've not had authors set for these things. But now if we go to book create, we set the title to be my book, we actually have an author to select. Now, this is me, this is my author, but I don't have a username right now. So technically, yes, it has selected it to me, okay? And then I go to overview and then I say price is 1. Now the problem is when I create that and I go to books, it still says unknown for my book. And the reason it says that is because the string is null. Even though the profile isn't null, the string is null, so it still says unknown, which is, I guess, kind of good, right? Because the profile isn't there. So we need to actually just hard code something real quick. If I jump over to the profile service, for example, something I can do really quick, I can say when we load up a profile service, let's say context.profiles.first. All right, let's get the first profile where the ID is 1, because I know that is me. I am the one with the profile ID 1. Then I want to say, let's just get that really quick. So our A equals this. A.displayName is equal to DapperDino. Then we'll say context.update A context.savechanges. So this is just some code I'm going to run once. I'm only going to, well, it doesn't matter if it's run more than once. It just, I'm going to put a breakpoint there, run the program, make this, this service is injected in the edit page and the create page. So if I just go to book create, here it is. I'm going to step through. Notice how when it's loaded my profile, my display name is currently null. If I go to the next line, my display name is now DapperDino, okay? And it's updated and it's saved it in the database. So if I stop and I just get rid of this code, I don't need it anymore. This is just a one-off thing because, as I said, my profile already existed in the database, so it had no name. If I run it now, any new profiles will actually have the name new user, and then in a future video, we'll have a profile page to actually edit your username. So if we go to books, unknown, 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 DapperDino, there we go. I can go view my book by DapperDino, and if I go to /edit7, I can change the author, I can make it null again. Actually, it doesn't apparently like doing that, probably because when I save, it's not actually a valid thing. We need to actually just do something about that if we want to, set it back to be no one. But at the end of the day, we're not going to actually set authors. We're going to make it so when you create a book, it just sets it to your own profile. So this should be actually automatic rather than selecting it. But yeah, we'll sort that out in the next video. I hope you guys enjoyed. The code's down below on GitHub. If you want to leave a like and subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, and goodbye. But before we end, I'd like to thank my patrons. A special thanks to Joss Folsom, Beardodie, Dustin Miller, Francisco Diaz, Rack, Yorosleta, Hades Zorko, Rene, and Marie Baldwin. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, link to my Patreon is down below. If not, there are also links down below to other social media, such as Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. If you could help us out by following on any of those, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.